truths out there which are also lies, Lord. And the church, our wise mother, is able to filter them out and give them to us delivered, genuine and true. Lord, be in our midst as you promised, when two or three gather in my name, I'll be in their midst. Open our minds and our hearts, and Lord, give us wisdom, focus, attention, genuineness, transparency, and vulnerability, and help us, Lord, to have an understanding spirit, Lord, where we can listen and hear the other side, try to understand where they are coming from, and to remember that we are all on the same side and we are all one family. Lord, be with those who are on their way right now in the Friday evening traffic, that they're here safely and speedily. Lord, those who are considering coming but considering staying at home, Lord, talk to them and move their heart, Lord, so that they can come and benefit from this. Lord, for our sake, the sake of the families of the church, and the sake of the children, the future of the church. Lord, speak to us through the mouth of the speakers and the facilitators tonight. And help us to walk away from this enriched and enlightened and with more wisdom and discernment and knowledge of you and your will and your purpose for all of us. We ask that please hear us through the intercession of St. Mary, all you saints and martyrs who plead from the beginning, St. Stephen the Hermit, and for the blessings of the coming Coptic New Year. Please, O Lord, in the mighty heart you love giving us. Please, O Lord, make us ready to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. All right, have a seat, y'all, and we will hear from our Black Matters Month facilitators to tell us what the next step.
So Jan will take all the servants, kids, and they'll go into the child care. Jahan, will you raise your hand? So y'all, this is Jahan, and she's in charge of child care.
Hold on.
Oh, yes, so they can hear, yes. Okay.
The force be with you.
All right, y'all, thank you so much for being here and really investing in all of us in our community. If you were here from the last Life Matters, you know that what we had talked about was communication and family. And we had set everybody into different groups based on the ages of the kids in our family. So what we're doing tonight is we are focusing on one of those age groups. And the reason that this even came up is because the high school servants have noticed, not just with kids in our class, but in other kids that we have been able to deal with and in families that we speak with, that there have been occasions where everything seemed to be fine in the family, and then, like right as the kids were about to leave to college, the parents discovered what their kids really believed about certain things, and it blindsided them. They were completely confused because they had one impression of their children, and then just to discover that it was actually something very different. Where's the high school kids go? Okay. Do you mind going?
Are they supposed to leave or stay?
No,
No,
they're supposed
stay.
to stay.
Oh.
So, Joe Cassandi and Rita actually had shared with me that Untitled Chapter had done a convention in Houston. And as part of this convention is that he got parents and high schoolers together and had them have an open conversation about the things that go on with the high school kids. And I thought, oh my gosh, this would be amazing for us to do in our congregation. And then I remembered, we only have like 18 kids in high school. And to put them on the spot, to have this open conversation about things that might be a little uncomfortable, we thought, okay, maybe this is not a good idea to do it this way. And then as we were discussing, we thought, okay, well, what if we presented questions to both the parents and the kids to see if they're on the same page about things, and then to get like spokespeople for the kids, people who understand the kids, people who have experience with kids, and have them be the mouthpiece for the students, but the high school kids are, of course, welcome to speak up at any point in time that you would like to. And then we would have the parents in here as well and discussing things about communication. So we thought of a couple of spokespeople. One is Emily Sawiris, and if you don't know Emily, you definitely will after tonight. She's wonderful, and she is she's a sophomore. Weird. No, wait, you've been here for 3 years? Okay, but one of those years doesn't count because of COVID. Anyway, so she's a junior, but she, like, in talking with her, she has a really good grasp on both sides of the communication aisle. Of course, she understands where the kids are coming from, right? But she also understands where the parents are coming from. She has that vantage point now, as a couple of years out, that she's starting to see, okay, so my parents really did know some things, and that she'll share some of that with us. And then Michael, who is, are you homegrown? Are you?
I'm in my 4th year of.
Yes. He's in his fourth year of life.
Is that counting
But
COVID?
here's one of the amazing things about Michael is that a lot of the high school kids talk to him.
Yeah.
And because of that, he has some insight that as parents we might not have, that they maybe wouldn't be as comfortable sharing with us. So we thought it would be great to hear from them and for them to share some things, to discuss minimally certain things that came up in the survey that we sent. We're not going to go over everything that we talked about in the survey, but we are going to talk about communication as a whole. And then hopefully we'll have a big open discussion with this, yeah? All right, so I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen.
First of all, thank you all so much for coming out. This is just really important. I've always felt it was really important, but then when we were just meshing this out, I just really felt the weight of this even more so. So let's go ahead and get into it. So there's a rift between children and their parents when it comes to today's many social issues. And our purpose here tonight is to help you build a bridge of communication to develop between the parents and the children. So let's go ahead and imagine that we're going on a road trip. The wise thing to do before we hit the road is to make sure that we take all the precautions possible, right? So we might make sure that the tires are inflated, that we have extra snacks and water for the kids and for us, that we might have a medical emergency kit on hand, have a repair kit on hand. Now, most likely, we're not going to need any of these items, right? But in the event of having a problem, we'll be prepared. And so that is the point of tonight's discussion. To prepare for the road hazards of life that our kids might experience, but also that we as adults might experience, particularly the adults that are the parents of the kids. So we sent out surveys a few weeks ago, as Missy had mentioned, to both the kids, or to the kids in middle school, high school, and college. And we also sent out surveys to the parents of the middle school and the high school kids. Now, the survey, if you took this survey, it asks difficult questions. And those questions are probably questions that you really never thought about. Or perhaps you didn't even want to think about them. So it asks, if you didn't take the survey, it asks about drug use, homosexuality, sexual identity, suicide, abortion, and some of those topics. So if you were one of the parents that took the survey, or one of the students that took the survey, you may have felt uncomfortable about it. And while the point was not to make you feel uncomfortable, Perhaps the discomfort itself was the revealing part. So, as far as the results are concerned, we're not going to go through all the results of the survey, because that is not the point of tonight. It's not to review each and every one of these topics. But we're going to use those responses to discuss in summation the overarching theme, which is opening the lines of communication between the parents and the child. Now, we want to be very clear. Emily and I, we are not experts, okay? We are not experts in the field of behavioral psychology or family counseling. We are strictly here tonight to act as facilitators and to help you develop the tools of communication. Every person here is an individual and requires a different approach. Parents might have multiple children, and each one of those children might need their own particular approach. So this is not a one-size-fits-all prescription. This is also not a one-and-done deal. This is more about giving parents the insight into how their kids view these social issues, these social topics, and the kids, how your parents might also view these social topics. So, to the parents, this is not about coming up with answers for every one of these social topics. It is about being available to discuss them. And to the kids, your parents may not have the answers to all of these particular social issues, these topics, but they can help you more than you think. So let's illustrate the disconnect between.
So this QR code is anonymous, it's an anonymous question form that we're going to be looking at throughout the presentation. If you want to jot down, if you don't scan it now, that's okay, because the QR code is at the bottom of almost every single slide throughout this presentation. So feel free, as you have a question, to scan it and enter in your question, and we'll be looking at them as we move on.
Really invite you to ask those questions, okay? It is anonymous, so please take advantage of that. The QR code will come up again, so in case you didn't capture it. Okay, so to get started, to illustrate the disconnect between parents and their children, let's look at this question we asked about pregnancy. So we asked the girls, this was in high school, how would your parents respond if you were pregnant and not married? So the kids responded everything from they'd have shame for them, perhaps abortion would be a consideration, and disappointment, but we would support you. Now, the parents' response to that same question, all of them answered the same way, that they would be disappointed for her, but support her through the process of keeping and raising the baby or putting the baby up for adoption. So this is an example of where the parents' response is actually more positive than what the kids anticipated.
Could you read, Michael, I can't read the colors.
The
print.
choices
Green
on
and
the
red
right.
at least. I think you told us what the yellow
Hey
was.
Sam, can you zoom in on
No, that's hard.
this? Okay, so the yellow is we would be disappointed, but we would support you in putting this, either having a baby and putting it up for adoption. And then the other two would be, I cannot read that closely.
I'll read it.
Yeah.
The red one is they would shame me and never let me live my mistake down.
The orange one is the positive one that 100% of the parents chose. They would be disappointed for me, but support me through the process of keeping and raising the baby or of putting the baby up for adoption. And the green one is they would want me to abort to protect my reputation. So the children chose equally the three other options. None of them thankfully chose the blue one, they would disown me.
So we're gonna use this as a bridge of connection, okay, where the parents had a more positive, or where the parents had a more positive outlook than the children anticipated. So now, perhaps the parents don't want to discuss any one of these difficult topics because one, they're afraid that if they give a positive response, somehow it would support the behavior. For example, if you ever got pregnant, we would support you equals, hey, you're free to have premarital sex, and if you get pregnant, you know. Number two, they just don't know how to discuss how to discuss a topic that they might consider really despising. Okay. Or three, they might just not want to deal with it. And this could go for both parents. This could go for maybe one parent is very supportive and is free and comfortable to talk about it, but the other parent isn't. So regardless of the reasoning, the children in one way or another are going to confront the majority of these issues. That's the bottom line. So what we want to do tonight is we want to develop a roadmap to communication and discussion. Again, the idea is not to tell you how to tackle each and every one of these topics, but instead to give you a framework of how to be open to discussing any one of these topics. In the same way, we should plan on how we will navigate our way to a destination. We'll pick out a rest stop, see where the gas stations are, we'll find a hotel, points of interest. We also want to plan on the road hazards and the accidents that we might, the difficult parts of life, which could be the accidents. It could be running out of gas, end up stranded with a broken down engine. So we just want to prepare ourselves. And we want to empower parents by giving them a fast track to understanding their children and today's culture, a cheat sheet to what kids are experiencing. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it off to Emily now.
So we're going to be discussing three main topics, which we have outlined on the slides. But the three topics are boundaries and trust, identity, and patience. So we're going to dive deeper into each of those topics and kind of break down some specifics and give personal examples there. But the first one is boundaries and trust. So we have some questions just to get you to start thinking as we continue to talk. For the parents, just start thinking about how do you define a boundary between you and your child, and then to the kids, how important do you think boundaries between you and your parents are? So some of the things we think that are important about boundaries are like a definite boundary between the role of a parent and the role of a child. When those boundaries start to kind of blur, where you start to maybe become your child's best friend, that's when we can kind of start to run into issues. When that boundary is blurred a little bit, there's no authoritative standpoint that the kid has to reflect back on. And then it's kind of a foot in the door standpoint. They did something, but the parent is kind of cool with it because the parent wants to seem cool. They want to be, in with the cool kids, and then the kid just keeps pushing. But in the end, when there needs to be repercussions, there's no one really to define those for them. Another boundary that comes in has to do a little more with trust. So as parents, you may be a little worried about certain things, and you may want to find out, is my kid doing this? Or I'm worried that my kid might be thinking something. But instead of going directly to your kid, you kind of circumvent and go around. You ask other people, you go through their phone, you do other things that are not okay. Breaking that boundary of trust really can have a huge setback in your relationship, and it's only gonna make things worse. You may think that it's the easier solution, but I promise it's really not. Confronting the problem and asking your kid, talking to your kid about it is gonna move your relationship forward in a much stronger, healthier way than trying to go around that and figure things out on your own. Another thing about trust is you have raised your kids to be amazing people. You have to trust that they have those morals in the back of their head, and you have to allow them to explore as they grow. And by explore, I don't mean like allowing them to try all these things and, you know, dip their feet in places that they shouldn't be. But I mean feeding their curiosity. Your kids are going to be curious about things, and whether you choose to discuss it with them, someone else will. So it should be you. It should be you explaining and addressing their curiosity. My mom always told me, like, when the time is right, things will come. Things will come in their due time. So when they get older, they deserve explanations. When they're younger, it's just dad says this, so that's how it goes. But when they're older, you're like, okay, I explained this to you now. Like, okay, for me, growing up, you know, sleepovers, that was not a thing. I never understood why. I hated my parents for it. I just thought they were lame. But when I got older, when I reached high school, they explained to me, this is why we didn't allow you to have sleepovers, all the safety concerns, all the other things. And it made sense to me. So then I trusted them more. I trusted their decisions more. I was like, okay, they're explaining to me why they're making these decisions. They're not just rash things because they don't like me. It's they have a reason. So understanding their reason made me trust what they had to say more. Another thing, just between college and high school, there's a lot of different things that they become aware of. So one thing that we'll hit on later is like drug awareness. When you're in high school, you kind of know that they're out there, but you don't really know what's out there. When you get to college, you're confronted, like so many other things are thrown in your face. So explaining to them and addressing that curiosity of, oh, what is this? Oh, what is this? And explaining to them like why they should stay away from certain things, that will help guide them to stay on the path of straight and narrow when they're on their own.
To the parents, we have in the case, we do have these questions, and I am curious to hear from you also. To the parents, how do you define what a boundary is between you and your child?
For me, a boundary is clear distinction between an authoritative figure to the child versus just a friend or a companion or someone who sits along with them just for the fun of it. You know what I'm saying? And those boundaries are drawn up fairly early on, at a young age. You try to draw those lines early and you try to emphasize them early, so that way they could understand that, hey, you know, when I'm talking to my parents, my dad, my mom, I'm not dealing with a friend of mine or, you know, someone from school or whatever. And frankly, I think it's beneficial to them because they don't get confused. You know what I'm saying? Because I think confusion draws up all the other things that you guys are talking about, because they start messing around, not necessarily because they're bad or, you know what I'm saying, they're just curious and they're trying to test their boundaries. And so I think if you're an authoritative figure from early on, you're firm, you're not a jerk, you know what I'm saying, you're just being firm. I think that helps facilitate
actually going off of that, do any parents here have difficulty with balancing that line between I want my children to respect me as a source of authority, but I also don't want to be so unapproachable. I don't want to be authoritative. I don't want to be a dictator appearance. So maybe you're always struggling to find out, I want my kids to see me as their best friend, but I also want them to see me as someone who is to be respected. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Just going off of what you were saying about her,
If you're asking if we have that issue, the answer is yes. I think oftentimes the hardest part, like I find as a parent, is when do I set in stone a certain rule, but when do I bend back so where my child who's 4.5 doesn't have to hide things from me because she knows I'm very firm with that rule. And that's a discussion that my husband and I talked about this just past Sunday. We were teaching Olivia how to wear her own shawl and take her with her. And she's still getting used to it because she's she doesn't want to do it as much. She feels restricted in it. And what we ended up discovering last Sunday, she took it out of her Sunday school bag and told us she doesn't know where she is, where she put them. And I'm like, well, maybe then I set that boundary way too hard that it got to an opportunity where she's more comfortable hiding it from me. So we ended up having a conversation as a family, and we said well, let's just wear it just when we're taking communion, because we want to respect the church, and these are the guidelines of the church, but you don't have to wear them all the time. But I also want you to be truthful and honest and let me know where they are, and not hide up in the back of your closet and tell me I don't know where they are. So it's definitely hard. And then the other thing that I wanted to add in regards to boundary, I think it also goes both ways. It's not just setting the boundary between being authoritative, being a parent, but also being approachable. But it's also setting a boundary and allowing them to make their own decisions in a sense, and saying, this is your decision, and if you decide to move that way, I'm going to respect that boundary. But I'm also, you have to respect the consequences of that decision too.
Yeah, putting the responsibility onto the kid, as their decision, it will make them understand why you put the rules in place. If they get to feel a part of the decision, a part of the rule, it will make more sense to them, and they'll be more willing to do it. It's kind of reverse psychology a little bit when they're younger. You're tricking them into doing the things because they think it was their idea. But that's how you start it off. And then I liked the family discussion. The open communication, especially when they're older, is super important to be able to hear both sides and come to a compromise to understand okay, well, this is why we do it, to respect the church, and these are the rules, this is why we do it, and explain it to them, and then to come to a compromise so that they can grow from that later is super important. And then going back to Michael's point about the boundary between being a dictator or authoritative and approachable, I think that boundary bends as you get older, as you grow. My mom always sends me these Facebook memes, but it's just when my daughter's 35, we'll be best friends and stuff like that. But you don't always see what your parents are saying or understand what they're saying until you're older, but your kids will appreciate what you're doing. It'll take time. So that's what we'll talk about when we get to the patience thing, that it'll come in their due time, when they're ready to accept and understand. It's not really something that can be rushed.
I don't know if you can hear me. Does my voice project well?
No, please use the mic for the camera.
Thank you. As someone who's currently got a
Not on.
teenager and
You have to turn it on.
so I do think the culture we live in. How do I turn it on? The first thing is you have to figure out how the So I think in the culture that we live in, we do have to be very careful with setting in stone boundaries. And actually, I think we need to be generally more malleable than not. There are a few things that, yes, we have to be very clear about boundaries in. two things I think that affect the way we approach boundaries. One is age of the child, as you alluded to, Emily. I think as they grow older, we do have to be open to negotiating some things, because some things are open to negotiation and others are not, and we have to pick our battles. Not everything can be a battle, nor should everything turn into a battle. Otherwise, we lose all the battles. The second thing is you have to take into consideration the individual child. Some children need boundaries without much reasoning behind it. That's the way it is. Other children, and they'll respond well to that. Other children, actually that backfires. So it's not as simple as saying, we are the parents, we're not going to be your friends. Some children, as young as in elementary school, they need you to be their friend, and that's okay. So I think we have to be very careful with this polarity thinking of it's either authoritarian or either friends. We need to be able to bend and be malleable depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, like we said, each kid is different. Each kid has their own. Like it's not an equation. It's not a set thing. Everyone is different. But also, we're not saying to define each boundary as completely separate. It is a combination. I'm just saying that when you become the kid's best friend, or when you lean, or you're too authority, when you lean too far to either pole, that's when you can run into many issues. So it's the idea of coming to a middle ground, understanding both sides, but knowing when you should be stronger in the authoritative power, or when you should step back, become more approachable so that they can talk to you, so that you are someone that they can rely on. And that'll change throughout your kid's life, throughout whatever they're going through. It's something that does change.
And so I think that something that Marina said, which is very insightful, which is about not make the boundaries so hard that the kid is going to want to disobey or to hide what they're doing. I wish that is something that I had understood when I was younger. But there's something that Shireen said that I think is pertinent, and that is that in this culture, because I'm operating from one vantage point, but my children are living in a completely different vantage point, and so they're defining certain things that are being done that I think are good and good for them as being horrific. And that's something that needs to be addressed, but I don't know how to address it. To redefine things, because boundaries, like you're saying, boundaries are good. And being wise in the ones that how we're asserting them, I think is where we can benefit from training.
This is just a question. Do we know what kind of personality needs more boundaries, and what are the personalities that we can be more malleable with? Can we tell, based on their behavior?
A dreamer personality.
Okay, I do not have kids, so I don't know that I can pick up, I can't speak on the picking up from behavior part, but I guess I can speak from me as a child. Growing up, my love language was definitely words of affirmation, and that was not something my parents were very strong with, so they had to learn to adapt, to come to me, to tell me things so that I would open up to them. So I think it is very much picking up on what your kids need. I don't want to say trial and error, but they're me and my sister are very different. So they would try things with both of us, and we obviously weren't both responsive to the same thing. So it's a growing and learning curve, that's for sure.
Yeah, between my sister and I just did whatever I was told. That was very easy. My sister, on the other hand, wasn't. Yeah, Emily is like my sister. We were talking about, I had this visualization that, we like boundaries, whether we admit or not, and I want to hear from the kids too, by the way. really want to hear what you think about what boundaries are. I think it's really important just for our mental well-being to know that we're constantly, especially kids, are kind of feeling around to see where the borders are. Perfect illustration is the roads, right? If they suddenly woke up the next day and we got on the road and there were no lines, it's a very uneasy feeling. Like you need to. Some people don't respect boundaries. I mean, the lines are there, but it's all optional. We want boundaries, and I think kids, like I said, I'm not a child psychologist. My experience growing up, just working with the kids, they're constantly feeling their way around this world, trying to see how far can I push, and then I get some pushback. And I think the mistake some parents make, that I personally experienced, was that they really tried hard to be their best friend. And I would get the behind the scenes discussion from the kids. They did not respect their parents at all. They talked really poorly of them, so far as to say, like, I can tell them whatever I want them to do and they'll do it. But then when you're with the parents, it's a whole other view. And I think we want to avoid that. So the way I see it is, you have a piece of property and you're building a fence around it, and you want to give your kids the tools and the knowledge to build their own fence. So as they get older, they can eventually build that fence around their property. They'll know how to do it, where to do it, but it's a gradual thing over time. I do want to, like I said, we want to hear from the kids, and for the kids out there, how important do you think boundaries are? Andrew.
Hello, so I think boundaries are important because if we push the limit too much, the kids will maybe start taking advantage. But if we push the boundaries way back, the kids will have no freedom. So we have to find the sweet spot. Kind of like how the USA is kind of big, but there's borders between different countries. So we can't call Cuba USA, we can't call Mexico USA, we can't call the whole Central America USA. So we have to find the sweet spot for their boundaries. And boundaries are important and complete.
I do love the idea of a sweet spot. I always tell people that if you put your kids in a box, all they're going to do is try to get out. They're not going to listen to anything you say. They're just going to fight to get out. So the sweet spot is perfect.
I think that I think of them as what differentiates between you living each other's lives. So it's more the other way around, so you can't exactly control your parents. And I wouldn't say it if I did, but it differentiates. It's so that you're not the same person for living your child's life, or maybe vice versa.
You mean to remember that your children are not you?
Yes, your children are separate from
Let them
you.
be the
So,
owners.
Yes.
I would say I agree and disagree with the point of things. It depends. So, I'm working in IT field. So, if anyone working in IT field here and working something called firewall. So the firewall by default block everything. And the business needs enable stuff. And this is kind of binding, but it's not binding. As they said, it's kind of sweet area. The sweet area, nothing can attack my company, but at the same time, nothing block my business. It's the same life, and same our kids, which is, anyone said, I have to put boundaries between me and my family, or between me, let's say I'm father and I have my wife and I have my kids and I have limits around me from even my wife. That will kill everything and make me alone all the time. And that will point us for your point, for my kids didn't respect me. No, he's respect you.
but your actions get response from his side. Every action had other action against the action to stop it a little bit. So sweet area is something good, but sweet area broke binders a lot. If we said sweet area, that means maybe I would blame use my son when he's 5 years old, like my son now, jump with me and I jump with him. Some people, hey, you have to respect. Maybe when he jump with me, he will stab me. Some parents would say, no way to stab me. This is broke my rules. It's not rules. Nothing called rules. Rules, it's a human creation. Rules, it's life creation. According to culture, according to country, according to religion, according to everything around us. So let's say, biologically, I'm still concerned about the war, but open, I'm still concerned a little bit because I try to be my best friend. Because I will try to do my best. Maybe my cat loves me. Maybe he will feel there is other thing he missing from me and looking outside. My turn is try to find what he missing. My turn is try to become his best friend, do the best, but add kind of respect. How can I respect? If I done everything with everyone around me as I expect my son do with me, it will be the same. So let's say I don't want my son yell to me. Don't yell to anyone. Try to be thinking before to start to do action. If you would like your son think before start doing anything. Don't say I don't need my son angry and aggressive. And you're shout and yell everywhere, even when you drive your vehicle.
Sorry.
Just kick.
I agree with showing the point that, like he's saying that don't set certain rules or boundaries or expect certain expectations from your children that you need to basically walk the talk, right? What you preach to the kids, you need to demonstrate that by going, don't expect them, for example, to not lie and you lie. Don't tell them to not shout, but you shout. Don't tell them to. Yes. One thing just to address Miriam's question. Yes, the different personalities do respond differently to certain boundaries. Sorry, we kind of went all over the place. Y'all, when you give a question or comment or whatever, try to be efficient so we have a lot to cover. But yes, for example, a dreamer, imaginer personality will require you mention it, but you give them some space. Okay? A fun maker, rebeller personality, if you give him a boundary, you're basically telling him, break this rule. It's by you setting certain rules, it's like, this is their personality. It's like, this is how I experience life, by testing the limits and breaking the rules. A relationshipper, for example, more than the boundaries, it's to use it from a different angle about how this will bring us closer together. You reward that with hugs and certain things. A workaholic, please give them personality. They'll love you, boundaries. They'll love you for giving them boundaries because this is where they love life, even as adults. So it's not our big topic now about personalities, but yes, it's like everybody's saying the same thing. This is on a case-by-case basis, child-by-child basis, even with the same child, depending on what stage of life they're at, we need to tweak our things. There's no one-size-fits-all thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Mike, please.
what are the signs that tell us? Is there any?
Are there signs that tell us if the child is emotionally hungry for something? Like, how can I tell if I'm doing the right thing? Like,
When they're 19.
Yeah, when they're out
said
of college,
they
they
are
say, thank you
19.
for not letting me watch.
before it's too late, yeah.
I also think that depends on each kid because a kid who's emotionally hungry for something could act out and become rebellious or just start doing things, or they could completely shut everyone out and become quiet. Like again, it's totally different for each kid, and I guess it's just something that as a parent you have to pick up on, I guess.
But they could be rebellious because I'm not giving them what they want, and they could be rebellious because I'm giving them too much freedom, because I'm giving them too much. So, is there a way to tell?
This is all very true.
I was gonna mention the picture. I'm gonna mention the picture that we use, that the boundaries depend on the situation. So the picture you use here, what we call it here, the front of the bridge, it's a metal beam guard fence. And you can see the posts are wooden posts. It's not too rigid, it's allow you to hit it, and it's gonna lean down a little bit, but it will not gonna hurt your car too much. Because the slope behind it allow, if you, in the bridge itself, it's a very rigid boundary. Because if you cross this boundary, you will go down to the river or whatever. So I would say the boundaries could be depend on the personality, but should be depend on the situation. If there is a reversible slope behind in this situation, that he can go and drive back, I will be flexible a little bit. But if it's a very dangerous situation, there is no way back, I will not gonna lean or I will not gonna make the boundary flexible.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, that's actually,
We did that on purpose.
we intentionally did that. So that was really well put. And Mariam, yeah, it's like we're not experts, but I think Mohab really kind of illustrated it really well there. I don't know if that helped or not. Andrew, did you want to say something?
So what I wanted to say about Abuna is that
Keep it there, keep it there.
when he said that if you give them too much freedom, it's like what he said with, I think, the boundaries. It's like when you're forging a blade. When you go to the final stage of cooling it, it could have a dent, or it could have like something in the blade. That's why we have to try what we can to fix the blade. Like if there's probably like a chip, we could solve that part, and something will happen. And if you send it too much, then it's probably gonna be too sharp. But as well, if you quench it, it can bend, it can also break.
Okay, so we're gonna move. Oh,
Sorry, before we move on, just to address Miriam's question, I think one of the best blessings that I had in my life was I had a couple of friends who were a couple years older than I was, and they had raised their kids, and they were raising their kids really well, and to be open to their input into my mothering. I mean, it's helped because we can only think what we think, right? And we do things the way that, or some things that we learned, but to get input from other wise people is so helpful.
okay, so thank you, Missy. We're gonna move on to identity now, talking about the importance of identity. And also for people who joined us after we started, I just wanna remind everyone that this QR code leads you to an anonymous question form. So if you have any questions, you can scan it and we'll see them and respond to them as we go. It's on basically every slide after this, so if you miss it now, you can catch it later. So identity. Why is identity important? That's what we're gonna dive into. This topic is a little bit denser than the other one, so I'm gonna try to hit all the points in an efficient manner. But one thing that we tend to forget, because identity in today's society can be very materialistic, very like people are scared of being canceled or things like that. But our identity is that we are children of God. That's who we are. Deep down, when it comes down to it, that's who we are. go ahead and like pose these questions and we'll come back to them afterwards, but just to get you guys thinking. So some of the questions to the parents and the kids is how important do you consider your reputation? What makes for a good reputation? And do you fear being canceled? And what does being canceled entail? And why is that something that people are so worried about today? So okay, so this slide shows some of the responses from the high school students versus the college students about drug knowledge. So the high school students didn't really, I mean, they may know more than what they listed, but it was just, not like small things, but more in college, it's everything. There's like force tranquilizers, there are all of these crazy things that they're faced with, right? So the importance of identity is you need your kid to feel completely in tune with who they are, because as they go to college, they're going to be faced with so many more things, and you need to protect them from being so vulnerable that they may fall to all of these other things that they're presented with. So, like we mentioned earlier, when some people talk about rebellion, they don't really mean rebellion, they mean curiosity, just like them pushing to see what they can explore, and that's when you address that curiosity. But the question is really, why does your kid want to do the opposite of everything that you're saying? Why you say this, you say left, they say why, you left, right, everything is the opposite of what you're saying. But when it comes down to it, high school is when your child is starting to really dive into their own identity. They're really trying to make a mark of who they are and differentiate themselves from you. Growing up, like, their identity was extremely similar to yours, and they're trying to mark their own beliefs and pave a way for themselves. So some of their opinions may seem a little dramatic, a little erratic, but just remember they're trying to create their own space, their own place for them to grow. But if you continue as their parent to reinforce the morals that they were raised on, and create an open space to discuss all of the differences that between the two forming beliefs, I don't want to say that they'll like entirely come back to everything exactly, that you all will be on 100% the same page, but the differences will kind of settle down a little bit. They will understand like the importance of what they were raised on because you're explaining it to them. In today's society, beliefs are changing so fast. Like everything that's considered normal is quickly evolving. So many things are becoming destigmatized so quickly. Like there are things that are upfront in my face that you guys did not have to worry about every single day of your lives. So kids today are expected to be so much more considerate, even supportive of so many things you guys did not have to worry about, and fear of becoming canceled or becoming an outcast, having no friends. It's a very scary thing today. Cancel culture is very real, and that can be a driving thing in people's identity forming. And so it's important to remind people that we are a child of God, we live for God and the morals of the church. So,
does everybody here know what getting canceled means?
No.
I wanted to ask you, we started to hear this term, or I started to hear it last year when there was riots and followed by this wave of cancel culture. But I don't know if the term existed before.
No, it
Can
did
you
not.
explain?
You heard it when it first
didn't.
started. You knew.
In summary, being canceled could mean you're ousted from the tribe, okay? It's like you're basically being ousted, or you could, that's just like a general idea. We all are trying to belong to a particular social group. And if you say the wrong thing, whether it's primarily on social media, there's a threat of being removed. That could be in school. It could from your peer group.
Yeah.
It could mean as an adult disagreeing with particular, say, a transgender rights within the company. You speak up, and you could be let go. You could be fired. You could lose your job. It may even be that you were caught saying outside of work and someone brings it up and your boss comes to you and tells you you're fired. That's essentially what being canceled has come down to. And so, does that make any sense? Did you want to say something about?
Someone help us turn it on.
To it. So, like, let's say everyone in your city likes, I don't know, tomatoes. And then everyone thinks you like tomatoes too. So, what if you say you like watermelons? And everyone hates watermelons. Everyone's gonna start being mad at you and start ousting you and make it the entire news thing. And then they're just gonna start maybe freaking you out and you're basically just kind of overshadowed, outcast. You can hardly show your face. Well, that's a bit more exaggerated, but
Not even.
No, that's actually it's a really good example.
It's
It's
like
a really
peer
good
pressure on
illustration.
steroids. Michael, would you mind repeating what he said?
So he gave another example to explain what being canceled was, and he said, let's say you live in a town where everybody likes tomatoes, and they think that you like tomatoes too, but you actually like watermelon, and then they find out you like watermelon, and everybody hates watermelon, so then they kick you out, and everybody starts hating you and disliking you, and they don't let you be a part of that town anymore.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? So, in light of everything that you guys are being confronted with, and all the choices that you have before you, which we never had to experience, how as a parent can we distinguish between curiosity and rebelliousness? Because that's where I think breakdown of communication begins, right? Because if you address something as being rebellious when in fact it was just being curious, then you run the risk of your child shutting down and like halas, like you had your chance and now you've missed it. So would you give us any examples that you could think of where you would be able to tell if it's curious or if it's just rebellious?
I think that the word rebellion has such a strong, like, negative stigma behind it because no one wants to define their kid as a rebel. No one wants to say, like, my kid is rebelling against me. So, and honestly, I think just not using the word rebellion when talking to your kid about, like, what they're doing, I think the difference between rebellion and them just being curious, I think rebellion, they're gonna go behind your back and do anything, like, in a rebellion in the sense that you're talking about, it's kind of going behind your back, doing things that you don't want them doing regardless. But I think with curiosity, or just like a keen for understanding, like searching to understand more, they'll come to you with questions if they feel comfortable enough. And that's kind of what we're hoping for. That's what the goal is, that they'll come to you with questions so that you can guide them to the right answer. Because if you send your kid off, college is an extreme amount of freedom and responsibility all at once. It's a lot to deal with. And so if you send your kid out there and they don't have a strong understanding of who they are and what their beliefs are, they can just fall more vulnerable, more susceptible to, like, fall into all of the change that's around them. I mean, like me personally, I'm a very loud person who's very strong in my beliefs, so I was not really bothered or affected by, like, what was around me, but people like my sister who are more timid, just they need a stronger reinforcement of, like, who they are. So helping them grow and understand that while they're still in your home is what's important. Like, being able to address things that you may think are issues or differences in y'all's beliefs, it's important to address that and allow them to make mistakes with you being there while they're at home, so that they don't go make those mistakes on their own and have to try to learn to recover from them by themselves.
Microphone there, please.
Oh, good, I'm sorry. Thank you. So I wanted to continue on what Asser was saying about the tomatoes and the watermelons. And if I understand correctly from things I've read, when somebody is faced like that, especially when they're young, they might actually start to think, I don't like watermelon. I like tomatoes because that's the right, like at first they might take it as a fake identity just to not be canceled, but then they might actually start to believe it because that's all that what's around them and it's easier. So there's a risk if the kid isn't really solid in their identity and what is their identity. It's not just culture, it's like my kids, I hope they didn't grow up, you can tell me just if I'm wrong, I hope they didn't grow up thinking they have to do certain things just because they're Bashara and this is what Basharas do. Or they're Coptic and this is what Coptic people do. I hope we've explained enough to them about who they are in God's eyes, how he feels when they make a mistake, that he will always take them back, that we will always take them back. And that we want them to step out, hopefully embracing those beliefs as their own, not because we'll be embarrassed or because they'll lose their identity if they don't do a Bashara type of thing or a Coptic Orthodox. We want them to choose it on their own before they leave, so they don't give up on it, because that's convenient when they go away.
Josiah, do you want to follow
Yeah.
your mom?
No,
please don't.
So, yeah, I agree with everything she said, mostly because I have
Okay,
to.
that's enough. Yeah. Stop there.
We're here for open communication.
So, first off, I think to summarize, cancel culture is how dare you, and then you're sentenced. You're given your judged and your sentenced. Anyways, I think the difference between rebellion is distinguished by that it kind of implies that there's been a wrongdoing. Somebody feels that they've been wronged, and so they're intentionally doing basically the complete opposite. And so I think sometimes that can maybe stem from not being approachable or being a dictator. And so by not doing that, somebody becomes approachable, and so curiosity is curiosity.
On cancel culture and on personality. On cancel culture, I teach web developer students, people who are changing careers because something didn't work out. They're 18 to 60 and they want to become a web developer. On LinkedIn, which I'm sure most professionals here are familiar with, if one of our partner companies finds out that you are a Christian, they will ask you whether or not you support gay rights or transsexual rights. And it will not be a binding question that you move on to the next interview. It will just be kind of a, oh man, isn't this person great? I really love what they're doing with this. Something like that, some sort of casual. And this is a wall that they're putting up to make sure that people do not get through who do not have the same value system that they have. That is the cancel culture. You will not have a job if you are a Christian. I am a rebel, and then I joined a bunch of Coptic people who have this really weird religion called Christianity, and they have been doing it for 2,000 years, and none of my friends understand why I don't go hang out with the sparkly jeans guy who gets up in front of people and talks for 45 minutes. I have rebelled against my culture and joined all of you. I hope you are raising rebels. I hope you are raising people who will rebel against the status quo. I do know that many of you are very concerned, and by the way, my wife and I found out we were pregnant, and the baby is healthy. I am concerned that I will not raise a child who is okay with the status quo and is just trying to get through and is just trying to adhere to my obedience and everything, because they will do the same with whoever is their authority figure, including their job, including the culture. I'm gonna have to raise some sort of weird blend of rebel and Christian. Somebody who's gonna rebel against the society, which is let in darkness, and will be a light unto them. And so I am aware that this rebel has a negative connotation in this Egyptian community sometimes, and that there are certain paths that everyone wants to go down, but perhaps there is a little rebellion against what exists out there and against their high school and against the college that needs to happen. And I am not the expert in all of that. I'm coming to you all to be experts in all of that. So, just as food for thought.
I think like the most important part of that is just not, when you are faced with those differences that the society believes, like versus what you believe, the most important thing is that you don't hide your beliefs to fit in. You stay strong in what you believe in, and you be that presence. Like you be the presence of Christ to everyone around you. Like don't back down from who you are, because then that's when confusion can start to happen and things like that. When you start hiding what you believe in to just fit in.
I have a question, and as servant and parent, Kathy now said some kids reach the level of, do I really love watermelon? So they start to doubt their identity. I heard that from kids in middle school saying, I keep saying I love God, I love going to church, but do I really love God? But they start to asking themselves that question. They start not to be sure about their identity. As a servant and parent, how can I help the kids to be steady and stand on a firm ground about their identity with God?
That is an important question.
Okay. But the question is about communication.
Yeah,
right?
it
So
is.
the question is, how do we have the conversations with them so that they open up to us to reveal really what they're thinking?
Is the question, I was typing some points just for summarizing at the end, but is the question that when the child asks you, do I really love God, what do you do?
How can I help that child?
Reinforce that?
Yes, to really clarify that for him, because he
Okay.
looks like he doesn't know.
Yes, so the answer is yes, of course you love God. Number one, the fact that you ask this question is an indication that you care, that your relationship with God is true. See, you love God.
Okay.
Also, look what God said, if you love me, I say it like every other Sunday in the sermons, and or in the Bible studies, if you love me, keep my commandments. So look at this, when I asked you to make your bed, did you make your bed? Yes, obedience, look at that, you're keeping his commandments. When your little sister, little brother take your whatever without, do you freak out or whatever? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, okay. So see, you're trying to keep that commandment. So hello, yes, you love God. So yes, we reinforce that.
So to be rebellion in a good way, they need to understand their identity, so they stop.
Let's not use the word rebellion.
Okay.
Because rebellion is, yes, at the end of the day it looks like rebellion, but we can call it resolution, firmness,
Okay.
Unwavering, steadfastness. A lot of Bible words that are a lot better. Rebellion is when there is a rule or a law in society or in the household, and somebody, for the purpose of breaking that rule, is breaking that rule.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, a kid could be breaking rules, but simply because out of weakness, out of forgetfulness, out of mistakes, out of whatever, not out of intention to break the rule. That's not rebellion.
Okay.
That's humanity.
So to make the kid steadfast in their faith and their identity, how can we do that? So they can face the world when they go to college and not go under any other beliefs easily.
Okay.
How can we make them firm?
I have that point, so I'll mention it in,
Okay.
in the summary at the end
Sounds
on how to do that. How are we doing on time?
I think we're good.
About 10 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I want to continue actually with what Austin was saying, because it goes to the reputation, and I wanted to put that question out there, and I wanted to hear what you all have to say from both the parents and the children. How important is reputation to you? And what makes a good reputation? That's the second question.
Is that for the kids or?
It's for everybody.
Oh.
I want to hear from both.
Preferably the kids first.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's hear from the kids first.
Turn it on. Working.
What makes a good reputation is the things you do and how people view on the morality of what you did. So, well, in my opinion, most things really aren't good or evil. It's more matters on how people view it. People view things as what is good and what is evil. So, on what you did, like that made your reputation, it kind of depends on how people would view it. And then that, or at least to most people, that depends on whether your reputation is good or bad. But what really matters is how you view it. Are you proud of the things you did? Then you probably had a good reputation. But if you're not proud and you regret most of it, then it probably wasn't good. I'm done.
Anybody else? Any other kids want? Andrew? Or? I know parents want to jump in there. I want to hear from one more of the kids.
A reputation, it depends on what you're viewing. So one person can have a good reputation on the internet as a very popular influencer, very popular family life. But what goes behind those cameras is what really matters. I mean, behind those cameras, you don't see all the bad stuff going on, all the child abuse going on, which we should keep a good reputation. If we're like famous, we should keep a good reputation in our own lives, and we should keep a good reputation for other people as well. Not just fans, but also for the people who are in your community. Like if you go to Beverly Hills and you're attending a church, you don't want to be known as the person who only sticks around for food time. You want to be kind of known as the person who attends the liturgy fully. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I just have one thing to add that I feel like is important to make a distinction between identity and reputation, and how building a child's identity and an adolescent's identity is more important than focusing on the reputation. Because reputation changes based on what culture emphasizes is important or not important. And kind of like you guys said, things that were considered a stigmatized topic 10 years ago, 20 years ago are no longer a stigma, and it's socially acceptable. So I think if we rely on the importance of reputation and where we stand in the social hierarchy, and we lose our identity, then our identity is based on what's popular for everyone else to do. So I think making a distinction of, are you making a choice that you're proud of if you're talking to a 4 or 5-year-old, or is this a path that you want to pursue versus is this a path that's socially acceptable and raises your reputation? I think making the distinction, especially for kids, is important because if you place the emphasis on where they stand socially, then they're building their identity based on what's popular.
Okay, I'm gonna jump off of that before we dive deeper, because I'm gonna dive deeper into that really fast. Because this part is super important. But that's exactly the point that I want to hit home on. That identity is what's important. Making sure they're in tune with their identity and not worrying about reputation and how society views them. It matters who they are, that they remember their childhood with God, and that they remember their morals and all of those things. So to dive deeper in that, why is being in tune with who you are and your identity so important? To put it bluntly, because so many other outs have become mainstream, and some of those outs that we need to discuss are 1, drug use, but 2, suicide. has become way more mainstream in today's society. We too often hear, I'm gonna kill myself as an acceptable way out of a hard situation. And the survey did show that many and too many of kids within this church have had suicidal thoughts. Of course, we don't know the depth of these thoughts for each kid, but we cannot let our kids think that suicide is a solution to our everyday struggles. We need to be able to talk to them about those thoughts and to help them understand the importance of mental health and how to deal with those identity struggles and the want to let go. So I'm gonna ask you these questions, and we can dive into them in a second, but I wanna ask you to just internally reflect on right now and draw your attention to as a parent, how do you feel about mental health? How seriously do you consider mental health struggles, or do you even think mental health struggles are real struggles that kids face every day? Because often in many cultural homes, mental health is kind of seen somewhat as a fake adversity or something that can just be overcome by just stop thinking that way or something, and it's not really discussed. Especially because now a lot of mental health struggles, people do often prescribe drugs to help deal with them first. If you don't see the right person to help talk through the different things, they could just prescribe your kid something. So of course, a lot of parents, my parents included, don't want to put you on a prescription for the rest of your life. They want to be able to see different solutions to that. But it's important to check on your kids, to allow them to vent and release the pressure that does build up from just living in this world and growing. This world is growing farther and farther from Christ every single day. So it's important to allow them a space to vent and to release that pressure. And of course, your kid might not want to open up to you right away, but you ask little questions each day to try to get them talking. And then one day, their walls will fall down and they'll be like, you won't believe what happened today, and they'll just start telling you, looking for you for advice. Right now, your kids might not see the wisdom that you actually do have, but I hate to admit, my mom is right, my dad is right. They do have wisdom, they do have things to actually offer and to help me through these struggles. And so, knowing that they are there for me, that I can call them and I can talk to them, I'm really stressed about this, I'm really anxious about this, I don't know what to do, and they can help me find ways to talk about those things and to discuss them and to know that they actually take my mental anxieties and my mental worries seriously is something that's super important. My parents, they don't really worry. I worry about everything. I worry all the time. I'm walking down the street and I'm worrying about these cars that don't even care about me walking on the street. So, but knowing that they still take my struggles seriously is super important, especially because it actually is Suicide Prevention Month, but taking those thoughts seriously and allowing them to discuss them is extremely, extremely important so that they can understand who they are and why they are important on this planet. They belong here, they are a child of God, and they need to understand that fully and completely so that when they do go off to college, they can stay strong to who they are.
You might be wondering also, what's the connection between reputation and being canceled and suicide? And, this issue with reputation, this goes for adults as well, not just for the kids. Suicide is just growing increasingly for kids, but it's for both adults and kids. This idea of losing your reputation and then being canceled, being ousted from the group is very feels isolating, and it's a reason for kids to decide that the easy way out is through taking their own life, and that's one reason why we really brought that up.
Our goal from that is to help them increase their strength of their identity so that they don't fall to the struggles of worrying about being ousted and worrying about what everyone else is thinking about them all the time. I mean, I go to an extremely liberal school. I go to UT Austin, and there are people, yes, Cook Horns, but there are people all around me all the time, you know, with very different beliefs of who I am, and it would be very easy for me to just put my walls down and accept everything that's around me all the time and to just go along with what everyone else is doing. But I don't go along with what everyone else is doing because I know who I am and I know what I believe in and I know right versus wrong because I was raised by really awesome people that help me understand those and help me mess up and they talk me through all of my struggles and we're still on our journey, we're still on our communication journey, but they have been there for me and so I know who I am because of the people I was surrounded with in my life. But it can be very easy for people who don't have that super strong connection, like in communicative connection, to fall to everything around them or not see exactly like, well, if everyone else is doing this, what could be so terrible about it if they don't have that strong reinforcement in the back of their head? I can literally hear my mom's voice in the back of my head all the time. She's always there, and I know she's watching, so she's probably gonna text me later.
I remember when I was in middle school, I had struggled in school of being cancelled. Like I'm gonna be left out because I'm different. So I was sharing those with my servant, one of my Sunday school servants, and she told me something I love personally till now. She told me, if you wanna gonna care about your reputation, connect it with your identity. So you're God's daughter, so build your reputation upon that, build on that. So whatever you're doing, keep it clear because you're gonna reflect God in you. So worry about not as like God's reputation, but as if you're representing Him. So do everything gonna make His reputation clear. Do not focus on your personal reputation. Do everything to praise God, to let people see God in you. So she made that connection. Like she didn't tell me do not focus on your reputation, but she told me to connect my identity to reflect that on my reputation.
Josiah, you can.
That's one of the struggles.
So I think we can tie those together because I'm thinking now of reputation as a bonus, and it's always been a thing where somebody pilot is the thing that immediately came to mind for me, is where you let your reputation be your priority, and so then reputation is a lot more shaky and it's based on a million other people, and so if you let that be your priority, then it can take hold of you when it fails, and it can seem like the end of the road when it fails. But also it's only a bonus if you use it as a platform to bring other people closer to God.
Can I add something? I just wanted to.
Keep it on. Keep it turn on all the time. Turn off the mics.
Y'all, after you speak, you don't have to remute the mic, just put it down.
Okay, just wanted to add something about the mental health and suicidal ideation and identity. And I think, and this may be controversial, but I don't think that being rooted in our Christian faith necessarily means that we will never have, or our children will never have mental health struggles. One can be rooted and grounded and very strong in your faith and still have mental health struggles. And I think as parents, we should not, if our children come to us with mental health struggles, we should not give them the message that you're not strong enough in your faith.
Yeah.
And your faith, faith is the answer to everything. Yes, it's the answer to many things in our mental health, but sometimes it is a chemical imbalance. Sometimes children need help, teens need help, and it is not always necessarily something we can resolve by taking them back to their identity. So culturally, it's difficult for us to accept that, but I think, you know, we need to be very cautious with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if what I said.
Oh, no,
happened
no,
to
no,
go on,
it wasn't-
yeah. But that's what I'm saying basically, like culturally, it is hard for people to accept like the realness of it. And so, not that being Christian solves your mental health struggles, I mean.
Absolutely, you know,
Like-
well said, I agree with you 100%,
Yeah.
I just wanted to really highlight that point, because I think it's a pitfall in our culture that we do think that it's a sign of weakness, it's not,
Right.
it's an illness.
Exactly.
Oftentimes.
That's the stigma that I want to go away, is the fact that it is a weakness. I want it to be, like, since it is not widely culturally accepted a lot of places, I want that stigma of it being a weakness to go away, so that walls can go down and so that communication can open between you and your child to discuss its realness, to discuss what they are going through, because it is real, and if they need help, they need you. They need you to be there for them. You are the only ones that, you should be the main point of contact that they rely on.
Go ahead.
Okay. Regarding the reputation, I don't think it's easy to tell a child or a younger person that reputation doesn't matter. We know it doesn't matter. Identity is what matters. It's difficult to do that. The problem with that is that you need to make it clear that you behave the same way, you talk the same way, you don't have the same reputation. Your reputation is different based on the sphere or the domain. Like, you behave in a certain way, your reputation at college or at workplace is different than your reputation among the people of God. One of the things we can build as the children, if we, I don't want to give too much Sunday school answers, but it is real. If we raise the awareness of children about God and the heavenly hosts and the saints in heaven and our friends in the church, we providing them an alternative sphere that actually more important. If we tell the child that by doing and saying the right thing, your reputation in God's eye and your reputation with the saints and the heavenly hosts it is very good. God is happy with you. The saints in heaven are looking down and they are so happy about you. So raising the relationship between the child and the saints and God will resolve this reputation issue until they grow older and realize that our reputation among men is not that much important.
I think we can connect that back to Mariam's point earlier. If you connect your reputation to your identity, and your identity is that you are a child of God, your reputation will reflect that you are walking with Christ, and those who walk with Christ are happy people, joyous people, and so that reputation will reflect onto every group that you are with.
Can I just add one thing about the cancel thing? I don't know, but sometimes I feel that maybe it is good for us to be canceled in a way or another, because speaking mainly about the teenagers, because if the cancel culture does not exist, they will think you will remain in that circle of friends, and maybe you will keep absorbing bad things and bad influence. Maybe sometimes God turns what seemingly to be bad things into good. Being canceled, maybe I will seek friendship among my friends at church and have a different group of friends.
We'll have Kathy, and then we're gonna move to the next.
Thank you. So I want to flip the cancel picture for a minute, and I want to ask myself as a parent, am I canceling my kid when they express a wrong belief or an unhealthy feeling? That's a serious risk to that kid for communication. Because to me, the cancel culture originally comes from being silenced. You're on a social platform and you can no longer speak. And so I think it's very important to us to listen to what our kids are saying and not say, oh, no, you can't talk about that, or your feelings are wrong. I mean, sometimes the feeling is wrong, like being mad at your mom because she served chicken instead of meat loaf for dinner. But I want us to be very careful that we don't do the reverse to our kid, and they feel like they can't express if they are having a feeling or belief that's different from ours in the churches, that they're not allowed to even have a discussion about it.
I think that's really good.
That is a really good point, and that's why what I hope all of you can walk away with from this is that it is important to not shut down anything that your child brings to you. If they brought something to you, that means that they probably are struggling with this, or they have been thinking about this for a long time, and they built up the courage enough to bring it to you. So it's important to open that up for discussion. And let's say your initial, we can't ask everyone to be like, oh yes, honey, let's sit down and talk about this, everything. Some things your kid tells you, you're gonna be like, what? You're gonna freak out, and a freak out is natural, and your kid can't expect you to not freak out about anything. But it's important that after that initial freak out that you take the opportunity to be like, okay, this is a lot. I need to think so that you can process and think of the right things to say and come together for a formal conversation to be able to discuss those matters properly. To be able to address all the worries, address the thoughts, everything in an appropriate manner, because if you're freaking out and then they're upset that you freaked out, it's going to be an emotional driven conversation and you're going to get nothing good out of it. So go to our final topic, jumping off of that point, is talking about patience, because like we mentioned earlier, this is not a one and done. This is not a, you started, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, done, everything's perfect. It is a process and it is a journey. And so as a parent, we're asking you to be a warm demander, which is what we talked about earlier with boundaries, where you need to have that authoritative side while also being open to talk, open to discussion with them, and allowing them to rely on you and to come to you with their questions. So as a parent, patience comes with sacrifice. So my mom actually is the one that described this to me because I asked for her help. But she told me that growing up, when I was in high school, I might have been a pain, but she sacrificed her likableness to provide me with the proper support and the growth that I needed. So she sacrificed me liking her. You may feel like your kid hates you or that they don't want anything to do with you, they don't like you, but as a parent, that's a sacrifice that you make for them for you to reap those rewards later. Our relationship is a lot stronger now, way better than it was in high school, and it's still growing. And another sacrifice to make as a parent is that you have to know and understand that it's natural for your kid to feel more comfortable going to one parent over the other. They may feel more comfortable talking to one parent that they think is a little more relaxed, or one that won't have as dramatic of a response. That is natural, and that is something that's going to happen, and so maybe it depends on the kid, obviously. Like, I don't know. Growing up, when I was younger, I would maybe tell my dad things first because he just seemed more relaxed, like just a little more easygoing, and I knew mom would get real upset about something. But now I can talk to both of them openly and freely, and we have a very open communication in our relationship. And another thing, going back to the likableness, in high school, your kid doesn't really relate to you that much. They might think you're weird, they might think you're embarrassing, but as you progress through life, you become less embarrassing and you become more, oh, my parent is just another human, and they actually have good advice to give, and they're actually wise, and then they can become your friends. After you've set the discipline, after you've guided them to do the right thing, and they're able to make those right decisions on their own, you can become their friends. You can begin to have more of like an equal relationship where you're both communicating back and forth and expressing your understandings with each other while still maintaining parents as a parent figure, but it's a more flexible relationship. And like I said, it is a journey. It is, and one of the questions that came out, actually that is part of this, was what kind of mistakes do parents make with their first child compared to the younger siblings? So I would definitely say that is part of the journey. The first kid, me being the first child, your parent, maybe it's their first, first time as a parent, might be a little more uptight, a little more scared about things because everything is new. I mean, I'm still the first for my mom in many things. Like, I'm still the first. We're still going through it. Luckily, I have a million girl cousins that came before me for my mom to learn from. But I think first kid versus second versus next, it's a learning curve. So you get to the second kid, might be a little more lenient or a little more understanding of how things actually work. But I do think it's important to mend, once you learn how things, quote unquote, like actually work, to mend that same rules apply to the first and second kid. Okay, the second kid can't get it easy. That's not fair. But just remember that it is a work in progress, and that every reaction that you have could still cause setbacks. Just because you have grown so far in your relationship doesn't mean that there's no backward steps that could be taken. I mean, I'm still facing my own. Any reaction could cause your kids to close up again a little bit, but in given time, when they are ready, they will open up again. A lot of it is in due time of the kid, when they're ready to explore an open relationship and feel more comfortable to talk about things to you. It's a journey. It's like the yellow brick road. It looks all happy and super easy to walk through, and it's actually not. There's a lot of obstacles and there's a lot of little stops, and it's not as pretty as it appears. But in the end, the rewards that you will reap from trying to communicate effectively with your kid and to have an open relationship is super, super important. So then some questions to branch off of, talking about patience, talking about worrying, about the process. For parents, what do you fear most when it comes to disciplining your kids? And kids, what do you wish your parents could understand about you? What do you think that they would maybe ask you about? Because, you come home from school, oh, how's school? Good, fine, you go to your room, right? But it's the little questions, what do you wish they asked you about sometimes to maybe help open you up?
Maybe they can anonymously share this if they're not
You
comfortable.
can anonymously share this if you scan the QR code and say what you wish your parents would ask you about, and then I will read it, and no one will know it was from you.
We'll all go home and ask all the kids.
Yeah.
We all have to
Stop,
submit
stop,
the
stop,
questions.
That's part of the warm demander that we were talking about earlier. When you ask your kid questions, they can't seem demanding or pushy or judgy in any way. If you really want your kid to open up to you, it has to just be small little things to try to pique their interest, to try to talk to you. One of the things that we saw on the survey later, actually.
Really quick, the warm demander, that's, my brother-in-law is in education, and he was explaining to me that a warm demander is a style of teaching where the teacher, and this concept can apply to parenting as well, where the teacher makes it very clear that they have certain demands from their students. However, they're not a dictator, they're not so authoritative, they're warm and they're approachable. And the child can always, the student can always feel comfortable going to them and opening up to them with any concern, questions that they have. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and I just thought that was such a great term that they're using.
It's when the kid knows that they have certain expectations that must be met. There are things that you expect from them, responsibilities that they do have, but feel like you are there to meet those expectations when they feel like they failed to do so.
And probably not judgmental as well. You don't want to cancel your child, right? You want them to be able to keep coming to you. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the most important thing when your kid does come to you like Michael said, is to not offer a judgmental response, to not shut them down. Like we saw with the pregnancy thing and other things, they're worried about the parents, like, they didn't say disown them, but to just shut them out or to be ashamed, and you don't want your kid to come to you and like feeling dirty with anything. You don't want them to feel dirty and feel like they've done so much wrong that they can't come back from it, or that there's no way to like fix or mend whatever they did, and you want your relationship to not break or not be set back because of the way you reacted. But it goes the same way for kids too. Kids can't, like I said, can't expect their parents to be easygoing and happy-go-lucky about everything. You have to be understanding that your parents are gonna worry, or they are gonna react maybe a little like erratically at first, because they're your parents. They care about you. They're worried for you, and they don't want to see their kid, go through struggles that they couldn't even imagine that their kid was going through.
So, as a parent, if taking this survey caused you to pause and reflect on the fact that you haven't given thought to what your children's thoughts are about any of these topics, and this survey already accomplished basically 90% of what we intended it to do. So it wasn't really about the questions. It was about how well do I really know my children. And the thing is, we may know so many things about them as far as what their favorite food is, what subjects they excel at, what subjects they struggle at. But when it comes to certain of these difficult social issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis, we don't know. And so, where is that disconnect? And so this is what we're trying to give you is a framework of opening up these lines of communication between them, to begin to acknowledge these social issues, and to being open to discussing them. Yes, also so
one thing that these graphs show, and that we want to point out, is that 91% of the high school and college kids said that they feel connected to their parents. They either said that they strongly agree or that they agree. But if you look at the next graph, they say that they don't feel comfortable sharing. So where is this disconnect? They're saying that they feel connected to their parents, but that they won't share with them. So that's the main point. We need to figure out where that disconnect is. And if you look at the other, it's hard to read, but we asked the kids also, what do your parents do that make you feel connected to them? And what do your parents do that make you feel disconnected to them? And feeling connected to them, they said, just show me that they love me by asking me questions and spending time with me, talking about our everyday things, acknowledging that I'm there. And then for what makes me feel disconnected, it's they don't really talk to me. They don't really ask me questions when I'm around. They're not acknowledging, that I'm standing there. You're not having a conversation like you just ran into a friend or something about, oh, what'd you do today? Stuff like that. The conversation usually ends at, how was school? Good. Okay, dinner will be ready in whatever, an hour. So it's just continuing that communication. And as a parent, even though your kid may not want to open up, may not want to talk at first, because like I said, they don't feel comfortable sharing, if you're persistent in trying to ask questions, acknowledging their presence, asking them new things to try to engage them in conversation, they will eventually open up and they will start to feel more connected. they will want to come share to you. So then this will change, and 91 or more will say they feel connected, and way more will say that they do feel comfortable sharing things with their parents.
Okay, so we have a question to the teens. Do you feel you and your friends can talk to your parents about your mental health struggles? And what would make you feel safe to do so? Does anybody want to open up about that? Or that could be.
What's the question again?
It's to the teens. Do you feel you and your friends can talk to your parents about your mental health struggles, and what would make you feel safe to do so? This is one of the questions we received.
Yeah, someone is ready to share. Mary.
So I think as a daughter with very close parents, something that makes me feel really connected to my parents is having very deep conversations as if they were my best friend. Because at this point, that is what makes you closer to your parents. For me personally, and when my parents don't disregard my feelings or something I've done, and they support you through your emotions, and they don't yell at you or just put it aside. I think that when your parents basically just act as a friend and not as a stern parent, and help you through help you with what you're going through, that's what makes you feel connected to your parents, and not just someone who gives you orders and tells you what to do.
So it sounds like you've already developed those lines of communication already open, and so that when it comes time to discuss something that's difficult, you already have that, you feel comfortable to discuss.
So I think all this goes back to the parents being patient and taking the time, even though my parents can get angry with some things I do, they still act in a calm manner, and they're just patient in front of you, and they stick along with you. Yeah, and that's just something that's very useful when your parents don't just put how you feel aside, and they try to look more into how you feel. And as you said, when your parents ask you small questions and try to know more about your life, then the kids will open up to the parents slowly.
I think that's an important point, to make sure that the parents aren't putting aside your feelings. And so another thing that we had talked about earlier is that the kids today are facing a lot of things that you yourself may not have been faced with, or they may be feeling a certain way that you don't entirely understand. But it's important to let them know, okay, I don't entirely understand what you're feeling, but I'm here for you. I'm here to support you through however you are feeling. I don't entirely understand it, but I'm here, and I will help you throughout this process. And maybe if I am not the one that can help you, I will find someone that can truly help you and get you through whatever you're going through, and be able to talk to you about it.
Josiah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's not, okay. I was gonna say it's not like microphone serving, but it's because it's kind of a lot of what she said, where it's like, it's,
He froze. Disconnected.
I think the main point was like, it's acknowledgement. It's the fact that your parents are acknowledging, which is kind of what we talked about earlier with the 4-year-olds. They feel like they're part of making the decision, right? So if you're being acknowledged, you feel like, okay, I am a part of this relationship. I am here. I'm not just someone that they are telling what to do and I'm told to follow everything.
I remembered.
Okay, go for it.
I think you develop a relationship by not. It doesn't have to be like, what is life? Every day your kid gets home from school. What you develop a relationship through small talk, and then big talk isn't so big. It's not.
That's perfect. You know, I was just thinking, sometimes I have a 404 shutdown as well. And I think I can imagine as a parent and having these difficult conversations where a child comes up to you and they want to open up and you just have a 404 shutdown because you don't have an answer at that moment. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of communication is that you don't have to have an answer for every single thing.
Right.
You just have to be available. So eventually, you're going to hit the reset button. You'll turn the power off. The technician will say, "Did you turn the power off?" Oh, yes, I did. And wait for it to reboot. And like, I just need a moment, and we'll talk about it. And I think it's also important for kids. Sometimes, your parents are going to freak out. Okay, and I think it's important for parents to communicate this. What that freak out looks like, it depends. There's levels of freaking out.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it's important for parents, okay, after freak out, to communicate, to come back.
That face.
Okay, so children, it's important to realize your parents are going to freak out. It's unrealistic to think that they won't. But again, I think it starts with the small stuff and it builds up to the bigger talks. So this is why it's not a one and done. We don't have a one-size-fits-all prescription for everybody. It's important to start this process now. Even if your kids are in high school, it's really not too late for that.
Thank you.
That's a perfect ending. We have run out of time. So thank you for everyone who came and participated in our discussion. And I hope you all can take something and learn where the disconnect is and grow from that.
All right, that's my phone. Emily to stay there just in case any questions pop up or whatever. So I'm just gonna share with you just a few points that are kind of summaries, especially for those who came a little bit late. Kind of what we gathered from the meeting, just some of them, the main points. First of all, assuming that we all answered the surveys correctly, the children think that we would respond negatively or poorly, while we would respond logically or lovingly or positively. What does this indicate? So this indicates either that we are lying to ourselves, or we behave very poorly with the kids at home, but we're answering what, on an intellectual level, how we would like to see ourselves behaving. Like I said before, we talk about this in the break meeting a lot. It's very important that we're honest with ourselves. Or in your mind, do a quick survey. Or there is a communication gap, like what we're doing here. There's no communication at all regarding such important issues. So that's why there's this huge disconnect. So in your mind, do a quick survey of your communication with your children and how much of it are maybe orders or commands or instructions and chores and studies and whatever, and how many is questions or warnings about school or work, and how much of it has to do with like deep God matters or life matters, etc. And we are the grown-ups, so we need to take the initiative to be intentional in learning the world of our children, even if it's ugly or scary. And it's going to take some work and investing some time and energy in it.
and to take the initiative to be intentional in starting conversations with them. And of course, this means that we will need to be involved. We will need to have a relationship with them because, like Josiah was saying, those quality moments will come in embedded in the quantity moments. And then look for opportunities to bring up the conversations. Also, another point, if we don't talk with our kids about important life matters, Emily said this, someone else will. The world will. So let's meet the world too. Also, it's very, very important that we try our best not to freak out with our kids. And if we do, great communication, by the way. Moments will happen when I will freak out. Just bear with me and I'll explain after or whatever. And how we demonstrate this also in how we live at home. But as best as you can, it's very important not to freak out with our kids, no matter what happens, no matter what they tell us, no matter what they want to talk about. This will encourage them to know and believe in their heart of hearts that I can talk with mom and dad about anything and everything. And it's okay. I remember as a child, maybe, asking innocently, where do babies come from? No, don't speak like this. Go through something else. I'm like,
She's right here, man.
Okay. No, I'm not saying it with me.
She's
I'm
right
saying
here.
with other people.
I didn't do that.
I'm not talking about people, but I've seen this. So people ask me, like, or if a child, if a boy, a little boy, like 2, 3 years old, comes out wearing mom's high heels, we freak out. No, kids play, And when you freak out, actually, this means, oh, there's something here. Like this emphasizes. So try as best as you can not to freak out. As we've seen, every child has his or her own dynamic being. So we need to tailor what we do with them, boundaries, communications, expectations, goals to each individual child, and even more so with the same child at different stages in life. And even during the same year of life, we'll need to tailor it from one situation to another. Okay, we're dynamic beings. Don't put them in a cookie cutter situation. Just a few more points. While we teach the kids right and wrong in life, we need to try to also build in them a strong personality. Okay, when they go out there in the world, in high school, middle school, or college for sure, all their belief systems will be challenged. Okay. So yes, it's good that they learn the good stuff. We do okay with that, at least here at church and Sunday school and stuff. But also the strong personality thing is very important because they can learn the good stuff and not have a strong personality or self-confidence. Regardless of their own personality or temperament, we can work on strengthening. Yes, some kids are born with stronger personalities or strong wills than others, but regardless of where they're at, we can strengthen that and improve it. How do we do that? Is like so that when we teach them something that they believe is so, they also have enough confidence to where they are not easily shaken. For example, by implanting in them that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it's the right thing or the good thing. Or not with the annoying questions where if all your friends jumped off a bridge or even, not with that one, right? But with convincing, showing them how there are popular things out there that are not right. Also, a good way to build confidence is to give them tasks and responsibilities. I think this is the point Marty was asking about. Give them tasks and responsibilities, let them make mistakes, and let them learn from mistakes. Don't save them from mistakes, okay? This is the best lessons. Don't save them. And when they succeed and do it well, tell them that they did that thing well. Avoid general compliments like good boy or good girl or you're awesome or whatever. Why? What is the when you did this, you're awesome. So that means what? If you don't do this,
you're not
a good boy, you're not a good girl, you're not awesome. Even though you don't say. Say instead, I really like how you handled the situation. I was impressed by how you fixed this or how you did this, or like the action itself. Okay, the phrase, what will people say? What will people think? What will Abuna think? What will your servant say? This is terrible, a terrible phrase because it implants in them that we tailor how we live our life and the choices we make based on other people's opinion or the popular opinion. Okay, we ought to try to reinforce in them that there is a standard and to focus on what God thinks rather than what people think. And we can also balance that with a sense of being open to being wrong or not knowing everything and willing to learn from right trusted sources. What else? We need to get educated on child psychology, mental health. The diocese has a new program about a couple years old. It's called SMS, Sound Mind and Spirit. That's very helpful. Also, for 15 years now, the diocese has offered a tremendous program, and I keep telling you about it. It's called FMP, or Family Ministry Program. It's the equivalent of a master's degree in like counseling and psychology. It is not accredited, and you don't have to do it for the sake of service. You can do that for your own personal life, your relationship with your spouse, with your kids, and with other people. So strongly recommend that. It's very, very affordable. Oh yeah, can you think of biblical characters regarding the point, Shireen's not there anymore. Can you think of biblical characters who are strong biblical people, believers, that at times struggled with psychological issues? Yeah.
Elijah.
Elijah is a great example.
David.
Elijah, the great prophet, he got a point of he was so depressed he wouldn't budge, he wouldn't even move. As they say, he couldn't even get out of bed. He would sleep all the time, the angel would wake him up, he'd here, eat this, he'd eat it, go back to sleep and not move. And then again and again and again. Yes, David, when
His son died and he said that I worked every night in my bed and he was going into depression.
very good. So that one, yes, more situational as opposed to condition. Jonah wished that he would die, and other people wish that their luck. Having said that, being strongly founded in the faith and having a true relationship with God can definitely help combat the individual struggling from psychological problems or the temperament or whatever. Their personality can tend to this, their upbringing, their childhood wounds or whatever. But having a relationship with God can definitely help. Okay? But having these problems does not mean you're not spiritual or have a relationship with God. Also, we need to be very careful not to cancel our own children. I really love that point from Kathy. Because they have the wrong belief or say the wrong thing, or, please do not manipulate with emotions. Some people manipulate with strength and violence or authoritarian methods, and some people manipulate with sadness or withdrawing or the silent treatment or dismissing or canceling on children. Please do not withhold love and acceptance of the child himself or herself. I can definitely reject what they say or what they do, but my love for them should be unconditional. Like the first slide we looked at, yes, I will be very sad and disappointed, but I will support my daughter if she gets pregnant, if it would raising the kid or offering it up for adoption. The last thing that I thought was kind of funny, and I've noticed in my experience in life that almost all kids go through this. There's always the 2% outliers, but it's like a bell curve. Almost all of us went through these stages. When we're little kids, mom and dad are Superman. Then after a little bit, mom and dad are weird. Then after that, mom and dad are embarrassing. And then, does this sound familiar? After that, mom and dad are annoying. After that, mom and dad are the source of all my problems in life and everything that is wrong with me and all my quirks and flaws and everything. And then, hopefully sooner rather than later, mom and dad are human. Mom and dad, yes, they have their pros and cons, their virtues and flaws, and they did make mistakes. Yes, they caused them wounds, but they did their best. Hopefully this will happen more, in their 20s maybe or something, early 30s as opposed to their 50s or 60s. I think the key is educate yourself, invest and be intentional. And did I miss anything? Anybody want to add or ask? All right, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, from God, amen. Heavenly Father God, thank you so much, Lord, for this meeting. Thank you so much, Lord, for the effort and the studies and the research that everybody had to do in organizing this meeting, whether the speakers, the facilitators, the organizers, the people way behind the scenes in the other room, dealing with the children right now, as we enjoy this meeting. Lord, thank you for the openness, the discussions. Lord, let this be just a beginning of the thread of increasing and improving and facilitating open communication between parents and their children. Help us, Lord, to be people who are intentional, that we invest time in learning and studying and in growing, just like we do with word or investments or other aspects of our life. Bless everybody standing here, Lord, and those who hit the road already. We ask you to please hear our students in the session saying, may you know you've seen some models, so please come in for the mighty power of your love and cross. Please, Lord, make us ready to pray thankfully, our Father who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And now the love of God, the Father, grace of God, Son, our Lord, God, and Savior Jesus Christ, the communion and the gift of the Holy Spirit, will be our growth in peace. Peace of the Lord be with you. If we can give a hand again to Emily and Michael. Really thank you very much for your support. Also, if you see any mic on any pew, just bring it forward. There should be 5 of them out there. Thank you.